It began with a low rumble, so deep and resonant that most people mistook it for distant thunder. The early morning sky above Sitapur was a dull, sleepy gray, with clouds still clinging to the horizon. Vendors were just beginning to set up their stalls. Shutters of small shops clanged open, and the city, unaware of what was heading its way, hummed with the ordinary rhythm of life. It was around 6:42 a.m. when the first 911 call came in, a frantic voice reporting an enormous elephant lumbering down the northern highway, right near the forest boundary. The dispatcher thought it was a prank. In Sitapur, you got stray dogs, the odd cow, maybe even a monkey on a power line if the day was strange, but an elephant. But then came the second call and the third. By 7:05 a.m., the CCTV footage from the edge of the forest confirmed it. A massive elephant, tusks chipped and eyes glinting with something wild and furious, was making its way down the road. Not just any elephant, this one was agitated, destructive. Trees along the way had been snapped like twigs. A motorcyclist had barely escaped with a fractured leg when the animal charged at him unprovoked. Something had gone terribly wrong in the jungle. The city had never prepared for this. Wildlife occasionally brushed against its edges, but the jungle had always kept its creatures. Sitapur had grown used to the belief that its natural border was impenetrable, but this morning shattered that illusion. The elephant, soon identified by forest officers as Raja, a previously monitored bull known to wander but never breached the outskirts, was now barreling through the less populated outer areas of the city. Warehouses, old grain silos, a couple of mechanic shops all lay in his path. No one understood why he was heading into the city, what had driven him out of the forest. But the destruction was undeniable. Cars were overturned, gates ripped off hinges. A small godown full of rubber tires was in flames, not from the elephant, but from the panic his arrival caused when a worker dropped a lit cigarette and ran. By 8:00 a.m., the Sitapur police had blocked off 3 roads leading into the denser city sectors. Loudspeakers blared warnings, advising citizens to remain indoors. School buses were halted mid-route. Morning assemblies turned into lockdown drills. Across the city, eyes flicked nervously to the skies and the sounds of the chaos moving closer. Helicopter support was requested from the capital, but it would take hours. In the control room, the city's chief wildlife officer, Veer Singh, stood with his arms folded tight, a deep crease etched across his forehead. He had tracked Raja before, years ago, when the elephant was first noted for his aggression during mating season, but he was never considered a threat to human settlements. Something had changed. Elephants didn't just walk into cities unless provoked, displaced, or maddened by something beyond comprehension. Veer didn't believe in reacting with violence. Tranquilizing an elephant was a delicate business. Do it wrong, and you either kill the animal or leave it enraged and half-sedated, twice as dangerous. Yet they were running out of time. News channels had caught wind. Drones were now buzzing in the sky above the elephant, some broadcasting live as Raja smashed through a parked auto rickshaw with a scream that chilled even the bravest. An emergency coordination team was formed. Wildlife experts, police, fire department heads, a nervous representative from the mayor's office, and Veer himself. The plan was simple, in theory. Guide Raja back to the edge of the forest, into a corridor that had once served as a migratory path, now blocked by illegal encroachments and unplanned construction. If they could herd him in that direction, a waiting team of veterinarians with tranquilizers could attempt to sedate him safely. But how do you herd a sick, stunned, terrified, angry animal through a city that had never made room for him? As the morning burned toward noon, Raja had reached the industrial quarter. A group of workers from a chemical plant barely escaped when he shattered the outer fence and began tearing into containers stacked nearby. Sparks flew as steel met tusk. Police formed human barricades a block away but dared not fire. A single gunshot could make matters worse. Drones whirred closer. From rooftops, citizens captured footage with their phones, the city watching its doom unfold in 4K. What no one had seen yet was the wound. It was hidden just beneath the folds of Raja's thick gray skin behind his left ear. A crude, festering gash, clearly man-made. Poachers. It made sense now. Veer cursed under his breath when he saw the close-up drone footage. Raja had been hurt, maybe days ago, maybe last night. Shot, stabbed, or worse, caught in some makeshift trap. And now he was running not just from fear but pain. The rage wasn't mindless. It was grief, agony, confusion. This wasn't an invasion. It was a cry for help that the city didn't know how to understand. At 12:42 p.m., Veer gave the order. He would lead the team himself. 3 jeeps loaded with trained personnel, nets, tranquilizer darts, and loudspeakers began to trail Raja from a safe distance. A 4th vehicle carried a forest tracker named Yash, who had worked with Raja's herd before. Elephants remember voices, sense. The hope was that someone familiar might calm him down. They played recordings of female elephants from Raja's herd, piped through mounted speakers. For a moment, just a heartbeat of one, Raja paused. His ears twitched, his eyes turned toward the sound. And then he roared, louder than before, crashing through a cycle stand and disappearing behind a crumbling warehouse. The chase resumed. By late afternoon, it was a game of chess through the alleys. Roadblocks were set, markets evacuated. A portion of the old city square, with its age-old temples and statues, was cleared for use as a containment field. Here, Veer hoped they could corner Raja, keep him from pushing further into the residential core. They couldn't risk him reaching the central districts, children, hospitals, old homes, congested roads. The cost would be unimaginable. By 3:17 p.m., Raja entered the square. His massive frame cast long shadows over the sandstone structures. Dust rose as his feet thudded against the ancient cobbles. Here, finally, they saw him slow, not out of exhaustion, but hesitation. Something about the place made him still, as if memory flickered behind his wild eyes. Perhaps the smells of the marigolds, the incense, the water flowing from the temple fountain. Perhaps something older buried in his blood. That was the moment Veer had been waiting for. From behind an old well, the vet team emerged. Yash began speaking to Raja in a soft, constant tone, a mix of Hindi and forest words he'd used years ago. The darts flew, not all hit. One bounced off his thick hide, another embedded deep. Raja stumbled, roared, turned to flee, but staggered, his legs moving unevenly. The sedative was working, not enough to knock him out yet, but enough to slow him. Another dart, then another. He turned in place, circled, and then collapsed. The sound of his body hitting the ground was like thunder striking earth, but no one celebrated, not even a cheer. People stood in silence, some with tears, others with their phones slowly lowering. In the quiet, only the faint sobbing of a child could be heard and the distant bark of a dog. The city, bruised but intact, had survived the day. As night fell, the team worked tirelessly. Raja was stabilized, loaded onto a massive flatbed truck, and escorted under armed guard back toward the forest sanctuary. Veer sat beside the animal, his palm resting on its vast, unmoving head. He promised silently that they would investigate the poachers, that the pain wouldn't be ignored. He knew the cost of silence. In the following days, Sitapur became a symbol, a city caught between nature and development, between indifference and compassion. The footage of Raja's march went viral worldwide. Environmentalists called it a wake-up call. Debates raged in parliament over forest boundaries, wildlife corridors, and the impact of deforestation. Children in Sitapur schools began writing essays titled "The Day the Elephant Came." But none of that mattered to Raja, recovering in a distant clearing under a moonlit sky as his herds slowly gathered around him, returning one by one to a bull they thought lost. His journey had left scars on the city and on himself, but in his thunderous way, he had reminded them all he was never just an animal out of place. He was the forest knocking on the city's door. The days after Raja's rampage through Sitapur settled like dust after a storm, slow, uneasy, but thick with memory. The city limped back to normalcy with a sense of having seen something it could never unsee. Streets were repaired, damaged vehicles towed, and buildings patched up with new cement that barely hid the cracks beneath. But people talked. In tea stalls, during bus rides, across dinner tables, the elephant was now part of the city's bloodstream. Some told the story like a ghost tale, others like a miracle. But everyone remembered the silence in the square when Raja fell, and how close they had all come to something irreversible. Veer Singh hadn't gone back to his house since that day. He stayed with Raja in the sanctuary, nearly 60 kilometers from the city, where the bull lay recovering beneath a grove of sal trees. Raja's wounds had begun to close, but they left behind a sickening, blackened scar, a reminder of human cruelty that no healing could erase. The forest here was quieter than usual, the herd moving around Raja like shadows, protective and watchful. Elephants are not beasts of isolation. They grieve. They remember. And now they had remembered why they feared the edge of the trees. Each morning, Veer walked the same path through the undergrowth to sit beside Raja. He read reports, took calls, issued orders, but his eyes never left the animal for long. He watched the slow rise and fall of Raja's chest, the occasional twitch of a leg, the low, almost imperceptible grumble that rumbled from deep within the elephant's body like a mountain murmuring in its sleep. At night, he'd sit by the fire with Yash, both of them too tired to speak much, sipping tea and staring into the flickering light. The investigation into the poaching trap began in full. What they discovered was worse than Veer had imagined. Hidden cameras placed in the northern zones of the jungle, areas that were officially protected, revealed unauthorized movement. Not just one group of poachers, but a network. Organized, efficient, and brutal. The trap that wounded Raja had been part of a larger operation. Baited trenches, disguised spike pits, and crude wire snares designed to catch tigers and leopards, but indifferent to what else might suffer. One camera even captured a group of masked men loading ivory into a black SUV under moonlight. A joint operation was launched with forest rangers, special police units, and anti-poaching squads. Over the next few weeks, arrests were made. Weapons were seized. Skeletons of long-dead animals were unearthed in shallow graves. But the kingpin remained missing, a ghost in the jungle who had walked among trees like a shadow and sold their bones for money. Back in Sitapur, public sentiment had turned. Where once they had only feared Raja, now they spoke of him like a wronged prince. A statue was proposed, bronze, 12 feet high, standing where Raja had collapsed in the square. Children from local schools visited the site weekly. Flowers were left there sometimes. A boy named Ankit even wrote a poem titled "He Did Not Mean to Hurt Us." And his teacher sent a copy to the forest department. Veer didn't believe in sentiment for sentiment's sake. He had seen too many animals die for it. But when he received the boy's poem, something in him cracked. He hadn't cried during the operation. He hadn't cried when he saw Raja bleeding or when the sedatives finally brought him down. But sitting by the elephant, under the same tree where vultures once circled silently above, Veer let the tears come. A month passed. Raja was walking again, slowly, stiffly, but each step more certain than the last. His herd had returned in full, 17 elephants, including calves, and the sanctuary's staff kept their distance now. Elephants had their own medicine, their own healing. A reunion was not a thing humans could choreograph. It had to happen in silence and in time, but Veer knew Raja could not stay. The sanctuary was safe, but it was not home. It was a fragment, and a fragment could never be enough for something that once roamed without borders. So a plan was born, not just for Raja, but for every wild soul that still lived in the shadow of Sitapur's expanding greed, a wildlife corridor. It had been proposed before, rejected, ignored, laughed at by politicians and developers who saw trees as lumber and animals as obstacles. But now, with the city's trauma fresh and the world's attention lingering, the time was right. Veer lobbied. He presented data. He spoke on news channels. He didn't beg. He didn't protest. He insisted, with the calm force of a man who had looked into an elephant's eyes and seen the fire of extinction flickering in them. After months of relentless work, setbacks, and sleepless nights, it was approved. A 3-kilometer stretch of reclaimed land, connecting the sanctuary to the deeper parts of the forest, bypassing the city entirely. It meant relocating illegal constructions, compensating landowners, building underpasses below highways, and planting native trees to restore the original path Raja's ancestors had once taken. But it was done. 2 years from the day Raja entered Sitapur, he walked down that corridor, surrounded by his herd. No media, no applause. Veer had kept it quiet. This was not a parade. This was a return. The ground was soft underfoot. The forest waited. And Raja, older now, slower, with the jagged scar still marking his side, stepped beyond the last human fence and disappeared into green. Veer stood at the edge, watching until the sound of breaking branches faded into the hush of the jungle. Behind him, Sitapur lived on, louder, busier, but changed. Somewhere in a classroom, Ankit recited another poem. Somewhere in a museum, Raja's story was told in photographs and ash, but in the forest there were no stories, only silence, and the sound of footsteps returning home. Raja never came back to the city, he didn't need to. And the city, for once, remembered to stay away.